stuffed frog, her husband's class ring, a Bob Dylan tape. As a group of visiting school children counted down the lift off out loud, others held a banner reading, "Go Krista."
I have heard from people all around the world writing and telling me what Krista has meant to them. She made children really want to know more about education. She made them excited about the space program, but using it as a tool for education. And she made people feel good about themselves. So I feel that her mission has thoroughly been completed.
Krista McAuliffe was buried here in Concord. Wife, mother, teacher, pioneer woman. America's first ordinary citizen to venture toward space. She laughed, she loved, she was curious. She tried to protect our spaceship Earth. She taught her children to do the same. And thanks to this living memorial, her children, all of them, can continue to touch the future. All these women are astounding, but stick around if you want to meet my personal hero. She made it possible for me and for all women to be full citizens of this country, and she nearly went to jail in the process. We'll also be joined by our special guest, First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. I'm on my way to Rochester, New York. See you there.
Tomorrow on ABC Sports.
Woman in America can claim this house in Rochester, New York as her heritage, because this was the home of the leader of the first women's movement. In other words, Susan B. Anthony slept here. You may know her only as the face on the $1 coin, and a rather prim profile at that. But Anthony was an eloquent, witty, powerful celebrity who devoted her entire adult life to winning women equal rights. Above all, the right to vote. Why, you might ask, was the female half of the population banned from the ballot box? Beats me. But the Founding Fathers kept that privilege and most others for themselves until Anthony and her colleagues demanded a change. This house was the nerve center of her suffrage organization. And here you can see the gold wire glasses that framed her radical vision of women as partners in democracy. The inkwell that fueled a barrage of letters to congressmen, senators, and presidents. And it was from this house more than a century ago that Susan B. Anthony set out on her gutsiest move ever. To recall that story, we are joined by a distinguished guest with her own long commitment to women, the First Lady, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Lynn, what a huge debt we owe to the suffragists, above all to Susan B. Anthony. I think what amazes me most is her dedication, her absolute conviction that her cause was correct, even in the face of searing criticism. She used every opportunity to make her point. Once, while lecturing on suffrage in South Dakota in 1890, she was interrupted repeatedly by a drunken fellow making rude comments. When the men in the audience cried, "Put him out," Susan B. Anthony intervened, saying sweetly, "No, gentlemen, he is a product of man's government, and I want you to see what sort you make." You can imagine how people responded when she decided to test the law. It was November 1872, just before a presidential election.
Susan B. Anthony and her three sisters walked up to the local barbershop and registered to vote. They had 14th and 15th Amendments in hand because they felt that that should have provided for their right to vote. Well, the local newspapers were outraged. They demanded that these women should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
A few days later, at 7 a.m., thoughtfully early to avoid a public spectacle, the newly registered Anthony went back to the barbershop and cast the first ballot of her life. She voted for Ulysses S. Grant, Republican candidate for president, and 2 congressmen. 3 weeks later, Thanksgiving Day, she was arrested.
The U.S. Marshal came to Susan B. Anthony's front door to arrest her. She had him come right into this front parlor, and he was embarrassed. She was a very famous woman, and he was there to arrest her. Well, he stumbled through the arrest, and she would have no part of it. He just said, go down to the city hall when you're ready. She said, no, if you think I'm nothing but a common criminal, you can handcuff me and take me downtown right now. Well, he didn't handcuff her, but he did take her downtown. And, you know, in those days, they didn't have police cars, so they took the streetcar. And when she was asked for her 5-cent fare, she said, I'm going at the request of the federal government. You can ask this man for my fare.
As the acknowledged ringleader, Susan B. Anthony was indicted and eventually brought to trial.
In this fine old courthouse in nearby Canandaigua, New York, you can still hear the echoes of the case. The United States of America versus Susan B. Anthony. It was a beautiful June day, 1873. In the upstairs courtroom, friends and gawkers filed in. Seated in the jury box, 12 white men. No women allowed.
Anthony's defense attorney called it the first instance in which a woman has been arraigned in a criminal court merely on account of her sex. The judge was not moved. In fact, he had written his decision before hearing the case and directed the jury to find a verdict of guilty.
Susan B. Anthony was incensed. Having been barred from testifying on her own behalf, she was now asked by the court if she had anything to say.
Yes, Your Honor, I have many things to say. For your ordered verdict of guilty, you have trampled underfoot every vital principle of our government. My natural rights, my civil rights, my political rights are all alike ignored. Robbed of the fundamental privilege of citizenship, I am degraded from the status of a citizen to that of a subject. And not only myself individually, but all of my sex are, by Your Honor's verdict, doomed to political subjection under this so-called Republican government.
The judge tried to interrupt her, but she stormed on. And when she stopped, the judge sentenced her to a $100 fine. She replied, I will never pay $1 of your unjust penalty. And she never did. But in her diary that night, she called her trial the greatest outrage history ever witnessed.
Susan B. Anthony did not live to vote legally. She died at her home in Rochester in 1906. But her last public statement, failure is impossible, continued to rally the troops, and the shrewd campaign that followed produced a hardy new breed of female politician. In South Pass City, Wyoming, the first territory to grant women full suffrage, you can visit the two-room cabin of Esther Morris, the first woman to hold political office in the United States. In Argonia, Kansas, tour the home of the nation's first female mayor. Susanna Salter was elected in 1887, learning of her surprise victory while up to her elbows in wash suds on her back stoop. Missoula, Montana celebrates native daughter Jeanette Rankin, who in 1916 became the first woman elected to the U.S. Congress. Her two widely separated terms were marked by voting her conscience in opposition to both world wars. That distinction is preserved in a giant likeness of Congresswoman Rankin in the U.S. Capitol.
Did you know, Lynn, over on the other side of the Capitol, the first woman elected to the United States Senate was from Arkansas, Hattie Caraway in 1932. But my personal hero is a woman who made political history without ever running for office, Eleanor Roosevelt. In Hyde Park, New York, you can tour the cottage at Val Kill, built just for her. But the entire world is a landmark to her social activism. Eleanor Roosevelt's courage in the face of enormous hostility has been a constant source of inspiration to me. Her emergence as a voice for human rights inspired all Americans, above all women, to have our say in public life. And that never could have happened without the most fundamental right of all, the vote. It is hard to believe we have had that right for just 75 years. Harder still to understand how anyone, especially women, could neglect to use that privilege in view of the terrible struggle to win it. So as we celebrate the suffrage anniversary this year, we should not only thank the women who fought to give all Americans the right to vote, but recognize how much it cost, how long it took, and how precious the prize.
It took 72 years, but you can retrace the route quickly today, starting in Seneca Falls, New York, site of the first public convention in the world to focus on women's issues and ask for the right to vote. It led to decades of demonstrations, campaigns, picketing, lobbying, and lecturing. It was, in the words of one suffrage leader, a continuous, seemingly endless chain of activity. Young suffragists who helped forge the last links of that chain were not born when it began. Old suffragists who forged the first links were dead when it ended. Nashville, Tennessee, August 1920. Although there is no official memorial to the breathtaking finale, the story itself is epic. A federal amendment to the Constitution granting the vote to all women had passed both houses of Congress. 35 states had ratified. With just one more needed, suffrage leaders targeted Tennessee. There at the last minute, state legislator Harry Byrne, 24, changed his vote to aye, saying he did it because his mother told him to. The 19th Amendment was law. In honor of the woman who had predicted its inevitability, it was called the Susan B. Anthony Amendment.
I shall not be here to see it, but the 20th century will see as great a change in the position and progress of women in the world as has been accomplished in this century. But it will have ceased to cause comment and will be accepted as a matter of course. Woman and her influence in making and shaping affairs will have to be reckoned with.
A Medina man is still missing after more than
Male heritage makes you want to hit the road in search of your own favorite hero. I also hope you agree that while some of these women were shaped by a particular place and others merely remembered there, each has enriched our lives and deserves her own place on the map. Keep in mind, this is not the end of the trail. Our country is full of landmarks to the wonderful women of our past. You just have to know where to look.
Travel provided by Continental Airlines.
Hey, Sunday provocative advertising with teens. Have we gone too far? Plus, fat cops. Could our finest lose their jobs for not being the fittest? On Good Morning America Sunday here on ABC.
Sunday, the First Lady says she'll travel to China, but should she go? A debate on human rights, nuclear weapons, and U.S.-China relations, Sunday on Brinkley.
Watched by more people than any other network. ABC.
William Devane, Chips the War Dog, late night tonight.